Passaria então a palavra para o Sr. Dr. Fabrice, peço desculpa, para o Sr. Dr. Fabrice Maire, Vice-Presidente do European Network of Maritime Clusters, licenciado em Finanças e atualmente é administrador da sociedade Intercompany, pertencente ao grupo Socatra, grupo proprietário de mais de 20 petroleiros, tendo na sua carteira de clientes o grupo Shell. Durante o seu percurso profissional, tem mais de 14 anos de experiência em shipping. Tem a palavra o Sr. Dr. Fabrice Maire.
Good morning to everybody. I have prepared this presentation in English. I've seen yesterday people speaking in French, as I'm French, but keep on going in English. First of all, I would like to thank you very much, Mr. Francesco Ribeiro Acosta, for his invitation, because he managed to, for me, the first time to be in Lisbon, to see all of you during these 2 days, and it's really a pleasure for that. Secondly, I would like to thank the new chairman of the European Network Maritime Cluster, Mr. Francis Valla, who is not possible for him to be today, because in France, in Dunkerque, there is les Assises de la Mer, and he was already invited for this. So the European Network Maritime Cluster has not yet the legitimacy to speak on the Atlantic strategy. The building of the network is still in progress after a couple of encouraging years. The cluster was set up in 2005 by France and by the Netherlands, and 10 countries was the first members. Our commitment, in first and foremost, is to promote the environmentally aware economical and social development of the European maritime industry. That said, and whilst keeping in mind who we are able to comment on the way to put forward Maritime Europe, and I think that such comments could be useful for the audience. So as I just mentioned, who we are. So you see the numbers of members at the present stage. So we started from 10, 4 new members as the Luxembourg. So I am from the Luxembourg cluster, as Miguel just said, also from the French cluster. We have at the moment 2 observers, Germany, Romania, and 1 applicant, which is Russia. So cluster are primary national organization, more or less mature. On the one hand, we have some clusters that are very long-standing and well-established. On the other hand, we have organizations that are still maturing and are currently being formed. The common thread is that all of them are, or tend to be, cross-industry organizations gathering all parts of the maritime sector of their countries. If I go back to the present slide, you see the kind of activities we have, so shipping, yachting, maritime services, and so on. So we try to cover all these kind of activities, but also we have, and Miguel is well represented, members of Big Fours, lawyers, so we try to cover in each country all sectors. Okay. The type of each national clusters, if I go back, vary, with some being almost state control or purely private owned, or being an intermediate mixed. Some cluster could inland navigation or logistics sectors, port industry, coastal tourism, insurance, finance in their scope. Others do not. The European Network Maritime Cluster could at least contribute to an homogeneous presentation of each national cluster, common criteria, coherent turnover and employment data, example, comparable scope, number of type of each member entity, and it will tackle this. So we try with the European Network Maritime Cluster to have, sorry, we go back after that. We try to represent all clusters. We have seen in Portugal 2 clusters today. We'll see one from Spain just after me. And it's not only one cluster per country. In the UK, we have three clusters. So we try to manage to have all clusters represented and improve the relation between all of them. As I mentioned before, we have a chairman, so Francis Valla, who has just been nominated in October, and we try to improve also the network. And Francis, with his experience, try to make some initiative and tools, like described just there. Identification of what the maritime sector represents in Europe as a whole by subsector and by country. In fact, it is the starting point of all future action and illustration of the importance of maritime reality. It is necessary tool now we have approximate non-scientific, vague and often partial figures at our disposal. At the present time, so we made a study, the French Maritime Cluster made a study and estimated that 8 countries, so UK, France, Italy, Spain, Germany, Norway, the Netherlands and Denmark, represent 1.8 million jobs and had an added value of 161 billion euro. The figures may be more or less true for that sample, but it's impossible to use it because the evaluation methods are quite different in each country. Once we have this, promotion and spreading the data regarding the European maritime sector to ensure its due consideration in Brussels. At the same time, reinforcing to the European network to increase its influence and be sure that economical maritime concerns in the broader sense are taken into account. In the short term, the European network could coordinate the simultaneous issue of position paper in each country concerning lobbying campaigns. In the long run, as we could imagine the possibility of the European network being raised to be a federation of national clusters, in other words, a real European maritime cluster, unlike the current loose confederation and acting by proxy in definitive matters. So the European cluster would like to make some proposal of concrete measure to this Atlantic Conference. The European Union should make available adequate funding to identify what the maritime sector is worth as a whole and by subsector. Each year, millions of euros are spent for numerous studies. It's always difficult to quantify what the money is spent, and this is only possible for adding a national figure on a common basis. It is a complex, long-lasting and cost field of investigation, and the competent cabinet will have to be acceptable and for everyone for fair criteria, and then cross-check the transmission data. It is a priority in the general interest of the European Union, the drawing of a century looming to the most maritime of making library regarding globalization. What we partially and certainly own is interest but not exploitable. It simply indulges our vanity. The European Union is one of the global maritime players, huge exclusive economic zone, 40% of the world tonnage, important ship owners in all the business, major shipbuilding with high added value, mighty offshore industry, oceanographic research, but this power remains virtual and cannot be reorganized as long as it has not been identified. The European Commission is the highest level, has to be more attentive to maritime concern. The commissioners are mostly unapproachable, with the exception of Mrs. Damanaki, who has made much appreciated efforts by welcoming representatives in Brussels and visiting them at regular intervals. I will come back to this point later on. According to the willingness of an integrated maritime policy, the European Union should look for the dialogue with the clusters, which, by the way, try sometimes to integrate the approach. Furthermore, the Commission stressed the necessity to create cluster in the Green Book preceding the Blue Book on a maritime policy. The European Commission should keep in sight on the fact that sustainability and development are closely linked and that they have to be permanently balanced, just as freedom and regulation, protection of future generations of safeguarding the present should be. Sorry, I miss. Sorry. Sorry, yes. So that's some remark about the Atlantic strategy. We had the chance to meet Mrs. Damanaki in September in Paris through the French Maritime Cluster for a high-level meeting behind closed doors. During the cordial and genuine gathering, the Commissioner stressed the necessity to have a better knowledge of the European maritime space, but above and under the sea. By example, drawing maps of unavailable resources and veritable constraint. I started to have I need some water, please. This knowledge could facilitate a regional approach in cope with the use of a different maritime and oceanic zone with an impact of sovereignty of member states. This offer was taken into account by an informed French Maritime Cluster representative. She has also indicated that Brussels wished to extend the approach to non-Euron waters. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. Bless you. Thus, through the Atlantic strategy, the European Commission intends to reinforce the cooperation with countries that are less insufficiently involved in the European initiative, such as the USA, Norway, or Iceland, in order to lead to better management in the ocean. We all launch this strategy to Lisbon very soon, she said. It is about a big comparative framework that could cope with general topics. Depending on the participation country, we may develop concrete initiatives. For example, she have underlined an agreement on the illicit fishing with the USA in September, last September. If we could come in a global agreement with all the Atlantic coastal states, it would be a resounding success. Why not? It seems to be and to go in the right direction, providing certain essential principles are respected
Mr.
with caution
Fabrice
regarding...
Maire, if you could summarize it for timing. Thank you.
Few words to say and finished. Partial agreement, even if regional and universal multilateralism about remain the common rule of the maritime sector. Each time there is a risk of competition, distortion, or another perverse effect on the maritime safety. In other words, the Atlantic strategy is a good approach, but the heart of the execution is not, on that account, easy, as Klovesic said. I would like to finish my presentation by telling us that it's really important, and I've seen yesterday people and this morning again, discussing about the interest having a European cluster, because at the present time, as I mentioned, we have cluster in Portugal with private funds, with also public funds. In Luxembourg, for instance, it's only private company. We have 41 companies in Luxembourg. And we try to merge and to develop the European cluster because it's really important to do a global project. And talking about Portuguese people, they want to develop this and they want to make relation with French. And we try, as a new chairman of the European cluster, and for me, vice chairman, to develop this. And we hope to see each other next year and have the same discussion or a better one, and to see the improvement that we will have with the various clusters. And I hope the list of the members will increase until next year, and the project belong to will be more important. Okay. Obrigado.